One. Happy January 6th. We're back live here on The Will Cain Show. A day where we certify Donald Trump as the next president of the United States. But it will be a Pyrrhic victory, a shallow victory, if it's only a partisan moment in time. We have to look at the stories, even the stories that occurred while we were on Christmas break, to see that we have to have a cultural victory to save the West. 2. Jonathan Turley on whether or not Donald Trump will be sentenced this week. It's doubtful he'll go to jail. But in the New York hush money case, will a sitting president be a convicted felon? And 3, sports. It happened. Everything's working. Right here for us on The Will Cain Show. It's all about the Texas Longhorns. It is the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Terrestrial radio in almost 24 markets across the United States of America starting on January 1st. If you are somewhere listening to your radio dial in the evening, wondering what you have here, you have the Will Cain Show, and we welcome you into the Willisha. By the way, you can always head over to Spotify or Apple if you miss an episode or miss a segment, and subscribe to the Will Cain Show and listen to us whenever and however you like. But if you want to watch us, head on over to YouTube and subscribe to the Will Cain Show. Monday through Thursday, 12 o'clock Eastern Time. What a break. Happy January 6th. Happy January 6th, fellas. It's a national holiday. I think that's become clear. It's one that will have to live on in our memory. Like FDR once said, a day which will live in infamy. They're already talking about it. I saw Sonny Hostin on The View. I saw this late before we came on the show today. I would have sent you this clip to play saying many people like Condoleezza Rice have tried to move on, but this is a day that she will not forget. It was an atrocity. She then went on to compare it to the Holocaust and World War II.
Oh, good.
In the same vein, an atrocity. Yeah.
Real genius.
Yeah. I think if, by the end of this year, we should do an award show of yeah. Most ridiculous takes. I think right off the bat, here we are, 2025, week 1 leader in the clubhouse, Sonny Hostin.
Didn't take long.
I think she's going to be a regular.
Yeah. I'll be ready to pull all those
If
clips.
we were taking preseason bets on 12 months from now, you here watching at home on the Willisha, if you are here with us, as I know you will be, and many of your friends come next December, if we were taking bets on who will win, whatever we want to call it, Charlemagne the God calls it Donkey of the Day.
Clown of the
we
week.
call it
Clown of the Day.
It's going to be a yearly award. We could do it by the week and then tally it up. This is something we're thinking about this live as we speak.
1, 2, 3, and points.
I think we do monthly.
First, second, third for every week, and you get a certain amount of points by that. And then we'll keep a running tally.
I actually love this idea. I think I want to do this.
I know
a point system on a weekly top 3 rating of dumbest pundit of the week. But right now, we'll sort out the details. But right now, preseason wagering, where would you place your money? Like, I think Sonny Hostin has to have the best odds to win that.
I mean, it has to be one of them on The View because that's just where the magic happens.
Maybe
Whoopi?
Maybe now that Trump is back in office, Brian Stelter and Daniel Dale will come out with their fact checks. That'll. Harry Sisson on Twitter is always egregiously bad, and he's getting paid by the Democrats, so he can't stop himself when he knows he's wrong. He's like, I still got to do it because I'm getting a paycheck.
Wow.
The View
the
has
problem
1
is
hour.
if you.
But MSNBC has a
Joy
whole
Reid?
day of programming.
That's true.
Correct. Yeah, so
It's even
you'd
more
have
impressive.
to have on your leaderboard
Chad is saying
Joy
Joy
Reid
Reid,
at
too.
MSNBC.
Yep.
But if you place your bet on Sonny Hostin or Joy Reid, I think you do have to factor this in. There could be changes in this year that do not include them as part of a full 12-month picture. Are there going to be changes at MSNBC? The View season runs through like April, and then they make changes, I think there is a reckoning in the media this year. I don't think they're going to – I am doubtful that Comcast and Disney are ready to sign up for another 4 years of resistance insanity to Donald Trump. And so I think it's very possible they make changes in the first 12 months to a lot of programming. That's my suspicion. I could be wrong. They could just say, hey, it worked in 2017. Their ratings went up, so maybe they could say, let's do it again. But we saw that insanity metastasize into a full-on national cancer. And I just don't know if they can look back and be proud at what they did over the last decade and say, let's keep it going. Let's roll the dice. Let's stick with Joy Reid and Sonny Hostin.
I agree.
So we were gone for 2 weeks, and there was a lot of stories that I want to cover here today. I want to get to. As we speak live right now, just about an hour ago, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has announced his resignation as Prime Minister of Canada. That, plus the certification of Donald Trump as the next president of the United States, is the news of the day. Those votes are scheduled to take place at 1 p.m. Eastern time today. It'll be interesting to watch that and see how many Democrats vote to certify Donald Trump. They will certainly peacock and be proud that they're distinguishing themselves from 2020, but I'll be interested to see if any others remain, as we just talked about with some media pundits, a part of the resistance. So that'll be something to watch here as the show goes along. We're going to talk about Justin Trudeau a little bit later with Professor Jonathan Turley of George Washington University. But we got to catch up, you, me, us. So 2 weeks, I feel like a lifetime passed since we were all together again. I mean, I really do. Like, so much happened. I had a very active sports life, guys. I was in Florida for a youth soccer tournament.
Fun.
Made it to a Mavs game on Christmas Day.
Hang out with your buddy.
Cool.
Longhorns. Who's my buddy?
Hegseth?
Who's my buddy?
Mr. Cuban?
I didn't get to. I actually saw Cuban.
Oh,
I did.
nice.
I saw Cuban in the hallway,
Nice.
and I stopped him and I said, "Mark, hey, Will Cain," and I think he recognized me. I think there was a glimmer of recognition, but I said, we need to have our debate out in person, not just on email. And he's like, I'm around.
Is he, though? Is he around?
Wasn't, when you're passing each other in a hallway, his body language did not completely turn from the direction he was going to give me. I mean, it was a slight pause as he kept going.
He knows a lot of people want to stop and talk to him, so he's on his guard constantly, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm not judging him on that at all. Longhorns playoff game against Clemson. I'm forgetting. There's some other sports things happened.
Notre Dame.
But the big news for me and my
Georgia.
family was our Christmas present. No, it wasn't Notre Dame beating Georgia. But we're going to break down all of that on the third segment
for
of the
you,
Will
though.
Cain Show. I don't want to play Georgia a third time. We got to get past Ohio State. That's coming up. That's going to get coming up a little later here on the Will Cain Show. We got a new dog. I told you guys I was very hesitant and resistant to this idea. I didn't want to be a multi-dog family. I think 2-dog families are pure chaos.
Cute.
But on December 23rd, we added Saint to our family. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, Saint is the black Doberman with a green Christmas scarf on.
a
Now, we
handsome
already
dog.
had Violet. Violet is a 6 to 7-year-old female Doberman. She's fawn-colored, which is like gray. A lot of people think she's a Weimaraner because she doesn't have her ears done, and she's gray. And it's harder to see her Doberman markings, the little tan parts. But she's great. We've had Violet for 4 years. I used to tell stories about Violet, how she would terrorize the neighborhood and chase squirrels. And she really settled in, though. She really settled in. She's chill. So much so that this has been a real problem. Okay, so we decided we were going to get a Doberman, a second Doberman. And we love them. I think it's the best breed. That's my personal opinion. I'm a big Doberman guy. Loyal, smart. I like smart dogs because I want them to be able to be trained. Do what you say. And I wanted a black and tan one. I used to have one. When I was in college, I got one, and he was my running buddy for 12 years. And so I wanted a black and tan one, and I wanted his ears done, and I wanted a male. I wanted all these things. So we shopped it, right? Like everywhere. And I don't buy new dogs. I just never have. In my life, I've never spent, thousands of dollars for a purebred dog. I just never have. And I'm not saying you're wrong if you do. I just, I've never seen the necessity to do it. And maybe I've just gotten lucky. You guys know the story. We stole Violet, and I adopted Leon, my first Doberman, from the Humane Society. So we start shopping Craigslist and things like that. And I should tell you, like, I also wanted, there's two kinds of Dobermans, American and European. And I wanted American because America. Not really. I really like, I just
sense.
like Americans. They're, but this is counterintuitive. European are super stocky, bigger head. They will weigh up to 100, 110 pounds. American are like 75, 80 pounds. Sleeker, more streamlined, more elegant. We saw pictures of Saint on Craigslist. He's about a year old. I was like, this dude's great looking. He's great looking. And we went and met the family, got his story in a park. I walked up. I'm like, he's phenomenal looking. And we bought him. We bought him and brought him home. I think we're his third home in a year.
So how's it going?
But I don't all judge that either. I don't judge that because people don't know what they're doing when they get dogs a lot. It's more about the people than the dog, you know?
It's a reflection.
So he comes home, and my first night, December 23rd, I slept 3 hours, and it was horrific. And he cried, he whined, he paced, he did everything. But I will tell you, every day he got a little better. Every day you started to see the real dog, his real personality. He's super smart. He's the sweetest guy. He'll come sound. He's I can't tell yet if he's going to protect the house. I think he's going to protect the house in a way that's super scary. Long and short of it is, he's going to be great. He's got one real problem, and it's a big one. He's half Doberman, half hound dog. Like,
Oh, wow.
all he wants is to mate with Violet. All day, every day. I mean, when they're separated, he listens to me. He understands things. When they're together, I can yell at him, and he'll be like, yeah, you're right. And he'll back off. But I swear to you, no more than 10 seconds before he comes sniffing around again and trying to mount her. And she's so done with it, man. She's like, what have you done to me? What have you done to this house? You've ruined this entire vibe. She's depressed, and it's a bummer. It's a bummer. And so it's going to be a bummer what happens to Saint because of this. You know, like, he's going to stay in the house. He's going to stay with the family, but he's going to lose some jewels out of this, you know?
Yikes.
Sorry, buddy. Got to do it.
Yeah. He has been the talk of our Christmas, which has been incredibly busy. And by the way, on that note, it's going to be a busy 2 weeks here. Busy month. So I got so much more I want to talk to you about, things that happened over the last 2 weeks. I'm going to remember them as we go. But it's going to be hard because we're going to be drinking from a fire hose because I've got more to talk to you in the news and about us and the show in the coming days and weeks. And so, you know, if you've been a part of the Willisha for a long time, we love you. We appreciate it. And I think that it's all good. It's all going to be great. And I want you to hang out and be a part of us. Let me, we got Professor Jonathan Turley coming up here on the show in just a minute. And, but I want to hit some of the biggest stories here. So guys, Patrick, over the 2 weeks we were away, it seems to me, obviously the biggest story was New Orleans and Las Vegas, the terror attacks, the bombings. The news cycle has now started to focus on the UK, though, right? Like, and these grooming gangs and what is it? Largely Pakistani men who have been raping young women in the UK, and it's been covered up by the press and the police and the government and everybody in the UK. Do I have that story right about what's happening in the UK?
Exactly. That's exactly right. And it's been going on for over a decade. And when people would fight back, like fathers trying to defend their daughters, they'd be the ones who were arrested. So it's a really big story. And Elon Musk blew it wide open on X.
Here's my question. A lot of these, and I read a lot of the articles last night. I got home super late from a soccer tournament. I got home at 2 a.m. Rough night. Flight delays. But I spent that time reading on this story a lot. It's horrific, by the way, guys. It's horrific. what's happening to these young girls. Like, I can't say it on here because it is not even out of a Hustler Penthouse type story. It's like, I mean, it's little girls gagged with rubber balls. It's multiple gang dudes. And I can't go on from here. Well, I want to because I want you to fully understand how awful it is. It's S&M. It's horrible. But one thing I'm curious about is a lot of these stories and the level of investigation that's happened in the UK seem like it comes back to 2011, 2014, years like this. Why is it set off in 2024? Why is Elon Musk set off on this story right now? Like, and I know it's been covered up and hasn't been covered much. There's been some press reporting. I saw Piers Morgan showing some stories that had come out with them in the past, whatever newspaper he worked for, Daily Mail maybe, I don't know. But why now? Why is it blowing up now?
There was an expose, I believe, by the Daily Mail, if I recall that correctly, that discussed it, and that's what Elon kind of pushed and blew it up. Other people have been talking about it for a long time. Dr. Saad, Katie. I'm not super big into British politics. I can't remember her name. Katie Hopkins, I believe, and Tommy Robinson, and quite a few others have been really trying to shine a light on it, and have been getting shut down for over a decade. So I don't know why people are finally taking an interest in it, but it's been happening for a long time.
So there's two levels to this story. There is what's happening, and then there's the cover-up. And then what brings the two stories together is the reason for the cover-up. And that's what I'm most interested in for today. We're going to have Dr. Gad Saad on this show tomorrow. He's been invested in this story. He'll break down some of it. But here's the story, the cover-up, and the reason for the cover-up. And I want to tie it into a few other things, including probably the biggest story here in America over the last 2 weeks, and that's the terror attack in New Orleans, right? So the terror attack in New Orleans, we know, right now they're telling us it was a lone wolf incident. A guy who had an ISIS flag in his truck mows down people in New Orleans on New Year's Eve. Also had bombs in his car that didn't go off. And then really the biggest story at the beginning of our break that I didn't get to do here on the Will Cain Show, but I did on Jesse Waters Primetime, was the story where Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy were arguing for why we don't have better engineers in America. And Vivek criticized American culture and said that we venerate too much of the prom king and the football star and not the math Olympiad and the nerd or the gunner, the guy who's always raising his hand. And he made the argument that unless we reform American culture at a really, really early age and within families, we're not going to be producing the best and the brightest in these fields of STEM. And therefore, we're going to have to be giving H-1B visas to people from across the world. So that ignited this debate about American culture versus other cultures. And to me, that's what ties these three stories together. So I kind of wanted to walk through that. So first of all, I pushed back on Vivek. I've spoken to Vivek for what it's worth to fully understand his position. I think he fully indicted American culture entirely too broadly. And I made that argument on Fox News, on Fox and Friends, and on Jesse Waters Primetime. I think Western civilization, Western culture, and at its apex, American civilization and American culture are the most advanced yet developed on the face of planet through human civilization. That does not make it perfect. It's flawed. And there are things to learn from other cultures. I think a lot, after watching Shogun, by the way, about Japanese culture and an honor-based society and the values of an honor-based society versus radical individualism and freedom through capitalism as a market that we have venerated in the West. But I still think there's no better culture than specifically America. It's risk tolerant. It's made up of pioneers and entrepreneurs, of wildcatters that dig holes, literally dig holes in the ground, seeking their fortune. People that pushed west, risking scalping to seek a better life. And I think that's been bred into us and passed down by generations to people that now start companies and take on risks. For Vivek to suggest that, there's some other culture somewhere in the other world that's doing it better and we need to emulate them, maybe there's things to learn, but he indicted it way too broadly. And then there's this guy in New Orleans. I'm tying these three stories together. This guy in New Orleans who clearly, Islamic fundamentalist. He's carrying an ISIS flag. And then finally back to the UK story. The reason that these gang rape, grooming gangs have been allowed to go on is that the authorities, police, and politicians and media, this has been written about. They wanted to preserve the image of the value of a multicultural society over the reality and truth of a multicultural society. And therefore, in the name of quote unquote community relations, not only did they suppress what was happening, but they arrested the fathers who tried to do something about what was happening. And so my point in the end of what ties these three things together is, and this is all worthy of deeper discussion, will continue, is there is such thing as culture. Not all cultures are of equal value. Our culture is specifically definable. And our culture here in America is unique and not only should be venerated, honored, but should be preserved. If you act like you're full of original sin or that you have no culture or that diversity is your strength, then you'll water your culture down to a point where you're looking around going, the only thing that's good about us is there's a lot of us of different kinds, and therefore we have to preserve cohesion and overlook the rape of children. That's where the UK is at this point. And so over the next 4 years, as we look at the victories, and the victories are today when you see Justin Trudeau resigning. I mean, a speech authoritarian with a mop haircut and a smile, resigning. There's victories everywhere. As Donald Trump is certified as the next president of the United States, as they get to work on an agenda together, Mike Johnson is speaking today about an omnibus bill, which I'm super skeptical of, but it's supposedly in coordination with Trump to do everything, border and everything else in one big swoop. I'm just here to tell you, short-term partisan victories will fail us if we don't understand the deep cultural preservation that we have to make a part of this victory. Otherwise, we end up in a place where we are the same culture as Mexico or Pakistan or whatever. We have to preserve America. We're going to break down some of this, also more of what happened over the break with us, with our sports teams, with our families. Coming up with Professor Jonathan Turley, that's next on The Will Cain Show. Have you ever wondered what happened to the legendary Chuck Norris? I recently saw a video he made, and I was shocked. He's in his 80s, but he's still kicking butt and working out. He's staying active. He's in, what's even more shocking, stronger, can work out longer, and even has plenty of energy left over for his grandkids. Now, he did this by making one change, and he says he still feels like he's in his 50s. His wife started doing this one thing, too, and she's never felt better. She says she feels 10 years younger. Her body looks leaner, and she has energy all day. So Chuck made a special video that explains everything. Make sure you watch it by going to chuckdefense.com/Cain. That's CAIN. Or by clicking the link below this video. It will change the way you think about your health. Once again, that's chuckdefense.com/Cain. And click on the link in the description below to watch the video now. You won't believe how simple it is. So just a reminder, the legendary Chuck Norris, he's a whopping 84 years old and yet has more energy than me. But I'm about to make changes. He discovered he could create dramatic changes for me, for you, for himself, with simply focusing on 3 things that sabotage our body as we age. Watch his method by clicking on the link in the description box below, chuckdefense.com/CAIN. Jonathan Turley, next on The Will Cain Show. From shutting down free speech in Canada to shutting down the truckers' convoy on a march, a protest for freedom, Justin Trudeau may have been one of the biggest authoritarians in the West, possibly only challenged by the Prime Minister of New Zealand, maybe Australia. But now he has resigned. It's The Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel, and the Fox News Facebook page. Always on demand by subscribing at Apple or on Spotify. Jonathan Turley, professor, is the author of The Indispensable Right, Free Speech in the Age of Rage. He's also a Fox News contributor and the Shapiro Professor of Public Interest Law at George Washington University. And Professor Turley joins us now. Hey, Happy New Year. Great to see you.
Yeah,
First of the year here together. You being such a champion, and you've written this book about free speech and how indispensable it is to, I think, Western civilization, quite honestly. I think you're a perfect person to sort of address Justin Trudeau today. I mean, the reasons for his resignation in Canada are multiple. I think, and probably in no small part by the way Trump has begun treating Canada right away, but also his fallout with his finance minister, Cynthia Freeland. But his legacy, Professor Turley, has to be directly tied to his antagonism to free speech.
Oh, it does. I just posted a column on The Hill talking about precisely that issue, Will. He is one of the most decidedly anti-free speech figures in the world. I've written about him for almost 2 decades. He's been a prime minister for a decade. I wrote about his father before him and his record. But
Fidel
the
Castro?
the book also discusses both him and his father in their crackdowns on free speech. And they used, by the way, the same basic laws to do so. What they did to the truckers was horrendous. I mean, they froze their accounts. They were so over the top. It was shocking, except that the media gave him nothing but kudos and praise. And it led to this moment where we all sort of spit out our soup when the Trudeau government actually criticized Cuba and China for cracking down on protests. And some of us wrote and said, what are you talking about? I mean, the Canadian government just shut down one of the most significant protests in its history on the very same subject that you criticized China over.
Right. But what do you think that's, you brought up his father. Do you think that, I spent some of the beginning of the show today talking about what's going on in the UK when it comes to this story that's breaking. It's been out there for a decade, but what we're learning about these grooming gangs in I don't know, dozens of cities in the UK where this is going on, this young people, young women raped by men of Pakistani heritage, but it's been kind of covered up. And what I'm getting at is how much of what Trudeau did in Canada do you think is unique to him? You brought up his father and his own personal instinct or antagonism towards free speech, but how much of it is also part of, really honestly, every other British colonial relationship with free speech except for America? Meaning New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and the UK itself, they don't care about free speech. It is not of value to them.
No, Will, that's a fantastic point. I go into that in The Indispensable Right, because what I discuss is that the First Amendment was arguably the most revolutionary act of the American Revolution. It was the greatest departure from the United Kingdom. And quite frankly, it remains revolutionary. There are law professors who want to amend the First Amendment because they believe it's too individualistic. That's a direct quote from one of my colleagues. Canada shares DNA with both the United States and the United Kingdom. Unfortunately, it took its free speech DNA from the mother country, in this case, United Kingdom. And they have a horrendous record on free speech. Free speech isn't a free fall in Great Britain. As you have noted, they've criminalized a great deal of speech. They arrest people even for praying in their minds, just standing there and silently praying. They've arrested people for criticizing homosexuality. Trudeau is the true believer in that cause. He was the smiling, cheerful face of censorship. And the media loved him for it. He and what are called the Human Rights Commissions of Canada became something of free speech commissars. They just recently fined a mayor in a town for not hoisting a gay pride flag during Pride Month. The town mentioned that they don't have a flagpole, but that really didn't matter. The comparison between the United States and Canada on free speech could not be more chilling. But under Trudeau, it became far, far worse. His father had the same authoritarian attitude that you see on the left, that as long as their motivations and virtue are clear, any means is allowed.
But so one more follow-up on this, but you've written the book on this. So I'm going to come back to Trudeau in a minute. I want to stay on free speech for a second. So I think that what I said this at the beginning of the show, what undergirds every single thing that comes up in our conversations and honestly our policy and political debates is a cultural debate. I am a true believer that culture is the most important thing because it sets the stage for anything else that happens. And so we need to, in America, we need to retain not only a legal protection for free speech, but we need a cultural protection, because if we lose the cultural protection, then the judges don't care. Then they'll follow that before they'll follow precedent. I do believe that. There are, you and I are both lawyers, you're a professor, you're an expert on this, but there are principled justices and judges, but I think they're actually in the minority. I don't think most of them say, well, here's the history and the precedent on free speech. It's more finger in the wind. Where's the current cultural climate? My point is, I'm curious what the average Canadian thinks of free speech. And is the average American still faithful in the way that we would hope to the cultural concept of defending something that you even hate, specifically that you hate? Because that's the point of free speech, defending what you hate to hear.
No, Will, you put your finger on it. Alexis de Tocqueville once wrote that one of the greatest protections in the United States of liberty is that it's in our culture, that the American people have been raised, they have been inculcated with this great faith in rights like free speech and free association. The question is what happens to us if that culture changes. And you're absolutely correct that in Great Britain, for example, most of the people in Great Britain were raised under a system that does not put free speech as a highly protected right. It is more often abridged than protected. It's treated as a privilege rather than a right. The same is true in Canada. So you can lose that sensation once the limb has been removed. And the question is, can you get it back? Now, obviously, there are many in Canada, particularly conservatives and libertarians, that want their free speech back, and they're going to come looking for it after Trudeau leaves. The question is whether the rest of Canada is going to look at this and say, you know what, there are wonderful things to get from the United Kingdom, wonderful things to get from the United States. But one of the DNA strands that we should probably take from the United States is free speech, because free speech is in a free fall in Canada.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't think Trump is joking, but him talking about Canada becoming the 51st state, I'm actually not for that unless we can find some real cultural assimilation and overlap. I mean,
well, I just can't get used to the cheese.
State
I can't get used to the cheese curds, so they're going to have to get rid of the cheese curds and the mayonnaise on French fries before we can consider statehood.
Well, if that's your standard, Professor, you just booted Wisconsin from the Union. So I don't know. That's not just Canada.
Hey, I'm a Bears fan. That's okay with me.
Is that right? Oh, you're a Bears guy, Chicago guy.
That's right.
So one more thing on Justin Trudeau. How, I was just in Florida, Professor, at a soccer tournament. One of the things I love about my sons playing soccer is I'm exposed to a lot of people from different backgrounds. And so one night I was sitting there with two of the dads, and one dad comes from Mexico and the other dad comes from Kenya. And, their kids play soccer and we're talking. And the Kenyan dad was telling me, he's been in America for a long time, but how much of a player in Africa China is. He's like, Will, China is everywhere in Africa, what they're investing in, what they're doing. And then, of course, we're concerned about China's role, and this is what Trump's bringing up with the Panama Canal in Latin America. But Trudeau praised China. Trudeau talked about China as a model for how they handled COVID. I know you said he criticized them at times, but he also looked to them, and there's speeches out there of him talking about their model of governance as a way to drive forward a progressive vision of the future. And I do wonder about that. What's the future of Canada? Did Trudeau set them up on this path of not just, their DNA sharing with the UK, but looking towards an authoritarian East, with China as their model?
Yeah, and it's not just China. I wrote a column last year involving a woman who came from Ukraine, a very brave woman, who was tried in absentia in Russia because she criticized the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And so she was going to get citizenship in Canada, and the Trudeau government stopped it. And they said, well, the problem we have is you were convicted in Russia, and the law you were convicted under is much like our own law. And in fact, it is, because the Russians convicted her of spreading false information. There's a Canadian law that does the same thing. And I wrote a column saying, is this the point that even this irony will not wake up the Canadian people? You just held up citizenship of a dissident because you have the same draconian speech laws as Russia. And that doesn't seem to register with Canadians. And I think that is part of the problem of that tradition coming from Great Britain. But you're right, Will. Trudeau was an incredible hypocrite. And his embrace of the Chinese government was chilling.
Yeah. Okay. This is going to be a big week on a multitude of levels. Today, roughly right after the Will Cain Show here, will be the certification of Donald Trump as the next president of the United States. But later this week, Professor, it appears we will have Judge Juan Merchan in the state of New York pass down sentencing on Donald Trump in what has been described as the hush money case with Stormy Daniels. We've talked about it. I totally forgive the audience if they've forgotten the details because there was like half a dozen cases against Donald Trump. But as a refresher, Professor, this is the case where they bootstrapped misdemeanors into felonies, individually charged every single check written, much past the statute of limitations, and prosecuted something that on the face of it looks like a federal case. They made it a state case somehow after the DOJ passed on doing this case. The state of New York's like, we got it. We'll do it. So everything about it, I think you've written this, looks like it will not survive appeal. That may have to get to the Supreme Court because we don't trust neither you or I, the state of New York. But what happens before appeal? What do you think? What sentence does he get from Judge Juan Merchan?
Well, Merchan is going to land this plane where many of us thought it had to be, which is an unconditional discharge. When we were doing the coverage in New York of the trial, I noted that most of these cases would end in a conditional discharge without a jail or probation. And that's what he's going to do because it won't trip the wire of the Constitution. But what was notable about this case is how long he waited. He could have held this hearing weeks ago and allowed Trump time to appeal. He intentionally waited until he's going to do this 10 days before the inauguration. That does not give time for appeal. But then he added a rather menacing aspect to his order. He said, if I am delayed in sentencing, I may have no choice but to do what Bragg wants, which is to hold this in suspension for 4 years. So that would allow him to hold a leash on the American president, this New York trial judge in Manhattan, for 4 years. And I think that this is planned. You could call it passive aggressive, but it's rather actively aggressive. I mean, it is a very clear effort of his part to say, you better not appeal because I could do something worse. But what he will give all of these lawfare warriors is he will allow them to say that Trump is the first convicted felon to be sworn into office as president. Now, of course, that's ignoring the fact that he's never had a chance to appeal the heart of this case. He's had other appeals, but he's never been able to appeal the many errors that Merchan made, and he's never been able to really appeal this absurd theory. Even the CNN senior analyst called this an absurd case. The Democratic senator from New Jersey called it BS, and that's the case that they are trying to push to finish before the inauguration.
So, there was a time when he didn't sentence Donald Trump, and it was almost like, does he get credit for not doing this before the election, right? Like, if he does it before the election, it could be seen as trying to, do what they were doing, interfering in the election. But do you think the sweet spot was he should have passed sentencing shortly after the election or after Donald Trump won, providing time for appeal? But what he's done by delaying is hold this over Donald Trump's head, keeping him from appealing, and now setting it up so when he's inaugurated, it's with the caveat or the talking point, first convicted felon?
Yeah, there's no reason. This is why I wrote a column saying this is the end of the longest performance of Hamlet off Broadway. I mean, he's been debating what type of judge he will be. He made a just horrendous mess out of this case. I mean, this case should have been dismissed at the outset. It's absurd. But then he's let this linger for years. And I was not nearly as harsh on Merchan until I sat in his courtroom and watched him at that trial. I was shocked at how nonsensical some of his rulings were. At one point I let out a sort of guffaw, and he sort of glared at me because it was really not intentional, just because it was a ruling on an objection from the Trump people, which was absolutely obviously true, and he just rejected it, and I couldn't believe it. But he had an agenda, I think, in this case. He was not going to give a fair trial to the former president. And in the meantime, he gagged the leading candidate for the presidency. So you have this acting justice in this little court in Manhattan who not only gagged the leading candidate for president, but is threatening that he may hold a leash on him for 4 years. That would mean that all of his orders would continue to run.
Wait, so last thing with you, Professor. I'm curious. I haven't heard you say this before. So, and you probably have, but so you're sitting in the courtroom, and that's the first time you could really sense how unfair this entire thing was. Well, I mean, so it was the sort of what I understood you saying is it's a sort of like what are on their face seemingly small objections, but obvious ones that all went against the Trump team that showed you like this guy is just he's an antagonist. He's on one side of this deal. Was it that? Was it body language?
Yeah,
what was it that made you all of a sudden go, oh my gosh?
Yeah, there's an objection to one of the questions by the prosecution, which, by the way, the objection was consistent with what Mershon had said previously, and it was consistent with the law. The prosecution was off the map on that question, and it should have been a very easy thing to say, of course, sustained. And instead, I couldn't believe my ears when he rejected it. And unfortunately, that was not unique. There was a series of these decisions. Mm-hmm. The worst decision that he made, of course, besides keeping this case at all, was he said that the jury didn't have to agree on what happened. He said that the way this novel theory works, that they were able to zap dead misdemeanors back into life, is they needed a secondary crime, a crime that was being concealed. That's pretty important, right? But he said that the jurors didn't have to agree on what happened. They didn't have to agree on what Trump was trying to hide. So you could have a 4-4-4 jury. You could literally have groups of 4 that saw this case completely differently. And he's saying you don't have to be unanimous on that. Just give me the verdict that says guilty. And that's what they did.
Well, we'll have to see this week. It's going to be a busy week. That's one of the things we have to watch. You've written about free speech. The book is The Indispensable Right, Free Speech in the Age of Rage. It's on sale now. It's a great way to start your new year. It's Jonathan Turley, Fox News contributor, right here on The Will Cain Show. Always love having you, Professor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Will. Happy New Year.
Okay. All right, so we're still catching up, you and me, over the last 2 weeks. So we've got a lot to talk about because this has been, honestly, the most wonderful time of the year when it comes to sports. Next on The Will Cain Show. Man, it's good to be back with you guys. Here you guys are on YouTube. The Willisha Canadian Highlander says goodbye to the worst prime minister in Canadian history. Suzanne says, happy Will is back. I was having withdrawals from the Will Cain Show. Great to see you, Suzanne. I recognize you. Jeppy Anderson, big member of the Willisha. 2025, bring it. Willisha gonna own. Longhorn up. It is the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Hey, fellas, we're gonna get this studio. We got work to do. So first of all,
well, there's an American flag.
Hold on, let me just see here. That's just a shot of the American flag.
Great.
I'm the director, which that's something we're gonna change, right? Like, yeah, right. That's one of the changes coming to the Will Cain Show here.
You're killing it.
But we're going to get the chat up on the show.
Yeah.
Right? That's what we're going to do.
Could be dangerous. I'm worried.
Here we go.
I'm very worried.
Oh, boom. Right, I'm going to get the chat right here. That means you guys have to be on your best behavior before Fox shuts me down. But we're always
towing the
pushing
line.
Fox here.
I'm the moderator. I'm the moderator. So just, I will kick you if, you say something over the line, so be nice. But I won't
Line's
kick
pretty
you.
far.
I don't care what you say. I don't care what you say. It's just I want to continue to let you say it. So if you get me in trouble with the bosses, then I
like
can't
my
let
job.
the whole thing go.
So
Yeah, but I mean, like, you know me. For those of you who don't know, I'll fight. I fight for you.
Yeah.
Guys, can you attest to that?
Yes,
Do
sir.
I fight?
Yes.
I mean,
Fight.
I fight. I promise you. And my vision for this show, and by the way, this isn't the big stuff coming this week, like getting your comments up on the show.
Yeah,
There's
that's
other
big.
stuff we're going to be talking about.
Another big.
But it is what I want. Yeah. Because I want this show, like, as we continue to, I want more audience interaction. I want this to be, it's not a one-way conversation. So what's the analogy? It's like the tragedy of the commons. In law school, we used to talk about that. It's like one or two bad apples can ruin it for everybody. So if you jump into the chat and you start,
I'm looking at a couple of you.
eggplanting it up,
I'm looking at a couple of you right now.
we're all going to lose it. By the way, that's totally going to work. Like, whoever is planning to throw eggplants all over my chat does not care if it goes away.
Why'd you? Yeah.
That's the problem.
You're encouraging it. Come on.
I just hope 4chan doesn't find out about it.
Who?
4chan.
Who?
Why would you? What?
They do 4chan. It's a message board.
Yeah, I know it
They
is.
do a lot of that kind of
know.
stuff. Yeah, it's dangerous. Yeah.
Will's in the know.
I'm in the know.
Okay.
I'm in this Netherlands where my kids will throw meme talk at me and see if I get it, but I only bat 40%, and then when I miss it, they're always like, "Thought you knew all this stuff, Dad," and I don't. We have a generational
James.
divide. Young Statesman James asked on the call today, "Why do you guys keep using this phrase text chain?"
I looked it up.
That's because that's what it is.
That's what it is.
I looked it up. It's because when phones used to be SMS pre-iMessage, texts were more like email threads than groups, and younger people view them more as chats.
Do you know what a BlackBerry is?
I mean, I've seen one. I've held one in my hand. I was like 5. Yeah.
But you've never used the phrase text chain,
No.
which I was using, not even realizing it was sounding old.
No, never used that
'Cause
before.
You call it chat.
Group chat.
Which, by the way, I don't like the word chat. Okay?
Really?
I'm going to say it. Yeah, I think it's effeminate. I do.
Really? That's what we call.
That's a huge Twitter word too.
That's the YouTube
huge.
I don't like it.
phrase for our chat room.
If a buddy said, "Hey, man, can we chat?" I'd be like, "Chat? What are we, British or ladies?
If you
We're
say-
not going to chat. You want to talk? We can talk.
If you say chit chat, that's worse.
What do you?
You know,
Chat is
who
okay.
said that once?
What do you?
I remember very distinctly Vivek at the end of one of our episodes, like, "Oh, thanks, Will. I enjoy our chats."
I'm not a chat guy. Why are you making that face, tinfoil? What's that face you're making?
It's a
He's
grimace. Using chat, saying chat. Thought Vivek was one of us.
Are you with me on chat?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Chat's fine. In certain contexts, yeah.
What if you refer to a group
But you
as
live in
chat?
Brooklyn, Dan. You live in Brooklyn.
A lot of people as chat.
I have a beard, dude.
you have-
What does that mean?
You have chats during brunch. That's what you're-
What if you're addressing
Yeah.
a lot of people like, "Hey, chat, what do you think about this?"
Let me ask you a question, Dan,
Yes.
as I use my makeup brush to make a point.
Dude, I don't know what you're about to say, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I know. Dan, let me ask you a question. If
Sure.
I took you out, which is something I did over the Christmas break, my son said, hey, Dad, can I take some of my friends shooting? I was like, yes, we can. And we went out to the country. We got a little spot out there, right? And I took a friend or two, too. So it was like 2 or 3 dads, and it was like 3, teenage boys. Which, by the way, at the outset, he was like, I don't think we want to hang with you. I'm like, that's okay. You don't have to hang with us. But I knew better. I mean, the minute the fire's built and we're sitting around the fire, where are you going to go? Men gravitate to the fire. And if you were there, Dan, and we were sitting around a fire, tossing back some silver bullets, something like that, banquet beer maybe, and would you feel confident saying, hey, guys, I've really enjoyed this chat, or hey, guys, can we chat? As you're sitting around that campfire in the country having just shot guns, I just want to know, would you feel appropriate using the word chat?
Well, I'm going to sound really douchey, but my voice is very low, so yes, I would. Hey, thanks for the chat, boys. Thanks for the chat, guys. Great chat, guys.
It kind of feels like an HR
You know
term,
my
too.
point.
I do know your point. You're absolutely right.
Like they tap you on the
But
shoulder.
that's why I say context is everything, because it depends where you're saying
think-
it.
you would self-censor.
No,
I
would.
think if
I
you were
would.
there, you would say
Talk.
what I'm saying out loud, you would say internally.
Mm-hmm.
And you would go, that doesn't feel right. That sounds ladylike.
You're right.
And I'm not going to use the phrase chat in this masculine situation. And so then I ask you why you turn into a lady over a Brooklyn brunch. You don't need to be throwing chats around just because now you're not by a campfire.
Hey,
Just
ladies.
have a talk with some dudes.
Yeah.
So what
I'd be
term
like-
would Sam Elliott use?
Good talk, buddy.
Sam Elliott would never say chat. Although he's
Right.
like, honestly, he kind of proves Dan's point. With his voice, he can say anything he wants
Mm-hmm.
and pull it off. Yeah. All right, so over the break, it seems like the big takeaway in sports is everybody hates the Texas Longhorns. It really feels that way. It feels like the whole world's against us as we continue to win and move forward. And is that just me? What are you laughing at, Tinfoil? Is that just my algorithm?
Yes.
It feels like
Yeah.
the whole world hates Texas.
That's how I feel as
I don't even have that.
That's how I feel as a Notre Dame fan for my entire life, so it's fine.
Yeah, more people hate Notre Dame. I think people were upset over some of those egregious calls that kind of tilted it in your favor. I don't think that was a hatred of Texas.
Oh, come
more than the. Yeah, I mean like the targeting or the drop pass in the end zone, that kind of thing.
You were the only one talking about the drop pass. You brought it up on the call this morning. It's not a thing, okay? It's like, what's that? It's like fetch. You're trying to make fetch a thing. You know what that I'm talking about? That's from, what movie is that from?
Mean Girls,
Yeah,
2004.
Mean Girls.
Yeah.
Clueless or Mean Girls.
Oh, that's
one
Mean
of those.
Girls.
Mean Girls.
Mean Girls.
Not Mean.
I hate that you know
You're
that,
still
James.
trying to make Florida State a thing, and you're going to try to make this not a catch in the end zone a thing.
Of course.
And it's not a thing. It's just not a thing. And now the targeting thing, I will give you this. I think it probably should have been called targeting. Probably. Although I don't think it's 100%. I think it's more like in the 70, 80% probably targeting. He didn't launch. We're talking about Michael Taft against Arizona State. By the way, the real takeaway on that is targeting is stupid because that was a great tackle. And you have to admit that. Everyone knows. Not only was it a great tackle, it was probably the only way he could tackle him. Because he didn't launch. He didn't literally target the guy's head.
He's right here.
It was face mask to face mask pretty much. And that's a tackle. That's what's called a tackle. And so if that's quote unquote targeting, well, this whole stupid rule means tackling. You're not allowed to tackle. You're only allowed to trip in football now. You have to trip, not tackle.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah, I completely agree.
and it's super inconsistently applied. So you can only be so offended if it goes for your team or against your team. You really can only be so offended. Now, I will say, if I was an Arizona State fan, I'd be super mad. I would. Because I do think 70% it was your call. I don't think Michael Taft launched and tried to literally target. Therefore, I don't think it should be targeting. But I also don't know that it decided the game. I mean, it gives them a first down and puts them on like the 35, and they have a horrible field goal kicker, and they have to get another 30 yards at least to even get an attempt at a field goal where they don't have good special teams. But and then there's a whole like 2 overtimes after that. They had a chance to win the game, and they didn't.
Make a stop on 4th and 13.
And Quinn Ewers came, dude, huge. And that was the most miserable game I have watched ever. And I was with people, and I was miserable. It felt like, you know how in the 1800s, if you were sick, like a thing they do to get you better is bloodletting? Like they'd cut you and just bleed you for a while? Because
That's
I
how
guess you're going to get the
Washington
bad
died.
blood out.
Yeah.
That's how I felt like the whole game. I'm being bloodlet. Like 16-point lead, little by little by little, we keep choking it up. But then all of a sudden, Quinn Ewers, and so I'm going, where's Arch Manning? This has been my constant. I don't want him to replace Quinn. I don't want to bench Quinn. I just want packages for Arch Manning to mix it up. And but then in overtime, Quinn stepped up huge. He was huge in overtime. Go ahead, Dan.
True or false, were you pissed that we were texting you during the game in the group chat?
Only Patrick. Patrick has a way of pissing me off at this point. And it's like, and
I know.
it's like every
I knew you were.
penalty. Here's Patrick's formula. He takes the opposite side of my team on every penalty, and then he does the freaking cliched, like, Texas, SEC gets every call, bought their way in. It's like, I am not on Twitter for a reason, Patrick, but I have to deal with this in my text chain. And then here comes the inevitable, cherry on top. Thought you weren't allowed to be in the playoffs if you are playing with a backup quarterback. Like it's some Florida State reference from a year ago about how they got jobbed and it was an injustice. That's the formula, Patrick. Tell me I don't have it down.
And
I'm just saying, I'm pretty sure after I was threatened last time against Georgia that I was trying to play it safe this time. I don't remember commenting that much in the group chat.
I was playing it safe.
Maybe I did. I don't know.
I think your self-awareness
maybe I had a few
indicator is a little off.
Something.
into the whiskeys.
Yeah. It was a break after all.
You got Texas, Ohio State this Friday night. And by the way, I don't know if you guys know this because it's Texas, and if it rains in the Northeast, it's national news. But we're going to get, the estimates are between 5 and 15 inches of snow this week, which is not what we're built for down here. So, I don't know how this game is going to go off without a hitch. Everybody getting here to it's at Jerry World, so at least it's indoor. And then Notre Dame, Penn State, great game as well. That's Thursday, right, Dan?
That's Thursday, 7:30.
Is that Thursday or
Thursday? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Honestly, I have other buddies that are Notre Dame fans, Dan. I went to Notre Dame game this year, and they said to me, if it's Texas Notre Dame, have to go. And I'm like, it's the same night as the inauguration. I cannot believe that's happening.
I would go.
Do you think they'll play it? They'll have it on the screen at the ball on Monday night?
I don't know.
I think
get one of those fancy charter planes. And hop back and forth.
Well, you're not going to get your tuxedo and
Where
go to
is
the
it?
ball
It's in
after?
Atlanta.
Okay, Taylor Swift. Relax.
Yeah.
I think we
It's in
should put
Atlanta.
I think we should put a bet down if that does happen. Knock
That's
on
like
wood.
a 2-hour flight.
I think you and I should put a bet down.
Okay. Yeah, we'll bet. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I predicted you guys in the national championship game, not us. I said it was going to be Oregon, Notre Dame.
When, a week ago?
I was obviously wrong about Oregon. At the beginning of the playoffs.
I know.
Yeah. But I think you guys have a really good shot. Well, how about this? Throughout this week, we'll talk about what else happened, including the end of the NFL regular season. What should happen with the number 1 overall draft pick for the Tennessee Titans? Should they take Shedeur Sanders? Should they take Travis Hunter? Which way should it go? We'll break all that down. We still have a lot of catching up. We can't do it in one day, but we're back. We're going to get caught up, and then we are about to put the pedal to the metal forward. Trust me when I tell you, you don't want to miss what's coming up here on The Will Cain Show. All right, but for today, for now, that's going to do it. Stay with us. This week we got Dr. Gad Saad. We've got Jocko Willenick. A lot of other big guests coming up this week, so don't go anywhere. We'll see you tomorrow, next time on The Will Cain Show.